everyone. Welcome back to the American Experiment Podcast. My name is Grace Keating. I'm here as always with Kathryn Hinderacher.
Hello.
And we are joined once again today by Bill Walsh.
Good morning or afternoon or evening or whatever you listen to this podcast.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Covered all the times.
You never know.
How are you doing this morning, Bill?
I'm angry.
Angry.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, you asked, so I answered.
That's great. Angry about politics?
You're gonna
angry.
see.
Oh,
You're
okay,
gonna see.
okay,
We're
okay.
gonna.
Okay.
Fiery Bill.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe some swearing.
all right.
No, I'm not gonna
Pretty
swear.
edgy?
We don't need to swear on the podcast.
Show your passion.
I do hear that's cool.
That's part of the. We're gonna get to that. Thanks for. Yeah, it's good foreshadowing.
How are you doing, Kathryn? Are you angry?
Pretty good. No, I'm in a fine mood. Medium.
great.
What about you
Medium.
guys? How was your weekend? Did you do anything exciting?
I don't really remember what I did. What did I do on my weekend? I don't know. I think it was nice. It's so
good.
long ago. 2 days ago.
I know,
that's a
it is
while.
Tuesday.
You did something fun this weekend.
Yeah, I had my bachelorette party. It was pretty fun. So I had
exciting.
a couple of friends and we got a little Airbnb in like North Loop area. We didn't go anywhere, but Minneapolis. Yeah. So it was fun. We went out to eat at Daria, which is like this nice new pasta restaurant. That was so good. Like
my
incredible.
gosh.
Some of the best food I've ever had. So highly recommend. But yeah, it was fun. I still have the remnants of a little like glittery bride tattoo on my arm actually for our viewing watchers, viewing listeners.
Go a little close up on that, Isaac.
Every time I take a shower, I'm like, it's really stubborn.
Well, battle wound. Yeah. Battle scar.
And our former colleague Allison was back.
She
your party,
was
so that's
back,
exciting.
and she has her. So Bryson is like her son, 4 months,
4 or 5
almost
months.
4 months.
Yeah.
So cute.
He's
Awesome.
really cute.
Was he there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Which is very fun.
Oh
He
my
got to
gosh.
enjoy the whole bachelorette experience, as every 4-month-old wants to. I'm sure.
I'm sure he'll remember fondly for the
Allison
rest of his life.
was probably one of the better people we had in that position, that job that we have now. I mean, it's just, one of the stars. I mean,
Yeah.
we got Isaac there now. He's okay, but Allison was a star.
She was top tier.
Yeah,
I
top
can't
tier, so-
argue with that. No.
So, anyway, good to see
He doesn't have a
Allison.
microphone today, so he's left with no response.
Let's jump right into your regularly scheduled programming. We have for you again today a great installment of Stop the Tape. Bill, what are we stopping the tape on this week?
Well, I see there's two things we'll just do two clips. One is from the Walz town hall meeting. He's been running around the country, Midwest, really, Iowa, Wisconsin. I think he was in Nebraska and now Minnesota, home in Minnesota in Rochester with a town meeting. So I think we've got a clip from the Rochester town meeting. Today we're going to be able to talk about, I think, some myths, some talking points, some Democrat talking points you hear all the time, some new ones that are around the budget and what's going on in D.C. with Trump right now, and then just some long-standing talking points that you hear over and over from Democrats. So we got some great examples. We can stop the tape and then just debunk them, I guess, the best we can. So
Love it.
the
Love it. I
tape.
should say, by the way, I forgot, the second half of this podcast episode features me and Kathryn sitting down with Bill Glahn, our resident fraud expert, and going over all of the insane developments in the Minnesota's wide world of fraud in the last 7 days or so. Getting
Bribery,
Jail,
jail, all the good
some
things.
guilty verdicts.
Yeah.
So definitely stay tuned for that. Isaac, let's roll our first tape.
Okay, let's set it up though. So this is he's taking questions or comments. This is really not a comment or questions, a comment from the crowd. This is a town hall in Rochester. It's not really a town hall because you had to kind of register through the Democrat Party in Minnesota to get in. So it's a very friendly audience for Governor Walz, and they're really just trying to figure out how to get their footing as Democrats. And Walz is like in this like existential search for meaning in life after he lost this national race. And it's like he's going around doing these town halls and just, so this is a woman who stands up and talks about how she was helped earlier in her life through welfare programs, and why are we so mean to go after welfare programs. So go ahead and roll it, Isaac. We'll let her talk.
I went to college,
Yes.
and I got Pell Grant,
Yeah.
and I had public assistance for a while, for 4 years, while I was in college. And I graduated, I got a job, I worked as a CPA, and I am
We're very excited.
so
I got a job.
grateful that I lived in a country that cared enough
Empathy, caring.
about me, and
Yeah.
my children,
Yeah.
to see us through that time.
No, it matters.
Yep. Yeah, it matters,
And-
says Governor Walz.
Right? 60 years later, or whatever it is, I'm still grateful. And I want to see us do the same for our young people
That's
and
right.
our
All right.
children.
All right, stop
That's
the
right.
tape before Walz. Stop the tape. So, I mean, what I want to say about this is, congratulations, good for you. at a time in your life when you needed help from the rest of us collectively through government, you got a little help 3 years, she said, while she was in college, and then went on to become a productive member of society, which is why they clapped for her. That's great. That's not today's welfare.
In the Democratic Party, that's big.
Well, say congratulations. I'm glad it worked out for you. That was probably the right use of a welfare program, a temporary assistance for a family that needed for you to become productive and then give back and pay taxes and all those other things. That's not welfare today in Minnesota. We have become so perverted in the welfare system. Welfare today is family after family, generational poverty, families stuck in this cycle that we put them in and keep them in. And for her to say she's so grateful and she wants to live in a country that does the same for us, her empathy is misplaced, as we see this all the time in the Democrat Party right now. Misplaced empathy and just all focused on, do we have the program available? How much money do we put in the program? That's how we measure ourselves as a society, and not the dignity of that family that's stuck in a generational crisis of welfare after generation after generation, because we're not holding them with dignity. We're not holding them accountable. We're not asking them to go to school like she did. We're just handing out money, and it's not good for them, and it's not good for society, and it costs a lot of money. So it's just a great opportunity to make that point. She's a fine person, and I'm glad her story worked out with that temporary assistance. But that's not the definition of welfare right now in Minnesota or in this country, really.
Well, it reminds me of the arguments they make when it comes to something like abortion, which we don't talk about a whole lot, but they'll take a story, something like, a woman who has really tragically been raped, say, and now she wants an abortion. That is such a small percentage of abortions. That's an exception to the rule, right? But they use that story to justify all 100% of abortions. They're using the stories of people who have been able to go on and succeed with temporary assistance from the government to justify way more people that are on these programs and are not succeeding on those programs. In fact, they're making them worse off.
Yeah. Well, and we live in a very empathetic society, especially in Minnesota. And when people think about, again, welfare or abortion, they think of those extreme cases and, I want to care for that person. And like you're saying, that's not only is that not the majority of people, but look again at why we're talking about this even. We're talking about it because Minnesota has a crazy deficit. And at the federal level, because we're trillions and trillions of dollars in debt, you have to, if we can't pay to support these people, then let's go back and figure out how we can raise that money and not how we can get ourselves deeper in debt to keep paying for them. And also, I would just say to this woman, the welfare system that benefited you 60 years ago is not the welfare system that we have today. This is such I don't know. It's frustrating to see people, use her story in this way.
Yep. All right. So let's roll Walz's response. And Walz's response, I'm not really going to get into the substance of it. It's just another example of his new trend with Tim Walz. Go ahead and roll that, Isaac.
I think elected officials have been too damn timid to not stand up to these things. Bullshit. It's good stuff that makes a difference.
You can stop the tape.
There's lots to unpack there.
Why does he have to swear? I really don't understand this. This is kind of
cool with the youth.
I would say it's a new thing. It certainly didn't do that when he ran for office the first time. But now, whenever he goes out and speaks in public as governor, in a town hall meeting in front of hundreds of people, he feels the need to swear. And so what does he think? You think it makes him seem more relevant or connected or cool or football coach? What's he going for here? I don't get it. I'm not the target audience, I guess. He's never going to bring me around to his thinking probably or his style. But this swearing thing, I think it's Bush League. I think it makes him look, it's beneath the governor to run around swearing all the time. Once in a while, you want to get excited and, I guess. But in public, as the governor, I don't get it. And he's very strategic. He's doing it a lot. And so somebody must have told him, or he believes, this is a good strategy. This is part of my PR strategy to connect with people. I'm going to swear a lot.
Yeah, I have the sense that he's trying to go after the working class voters who switched and went for Trump in the last election, and he thinks that it makes him, makes him seem more authentic, makes it seem like he really cares about their issues. And it's just another example of him not understanding. Again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but why people like Trump, why they feel connected with him. And he's using it as this cheap way to convince you that he really cares about your problems.
Yeah, one thing I like about that clip too is it shows the level of production value he's putting into this content he's creating. which is really interesting. We put on tons of events here at American Experiment to get the kind of content we just watched, where they are focused in on the person asking a question. She's somewhere in the audience, to get that focused in shot on a different camera, extremely high quality camera of him
sound.
responding.
Good audio, yep.
Really good audio. That's a ton of money spent on multiple camera angles and a serious want to get that kind of content we just saw. So I find that interesting. You know, why does he want this? It seems like he's preparing for something else, trying to raise his national profile if that's his focus in these town halls.
I didn't even think that. That's a brilliant insight. And we took this from his Twitter feed. This is his content. You're right. That we took, but you're right. It's very well produced.
I know, because it's hard to get those shots. We do these events all the time. And it's like, okay, well, now I got to get multiple cameramen. You're paying them by the hour. It gets so expensive. So we've never had that quality, which I love. But, you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, good point.
Such a good point.
All right, next clip is a completely different topic, different players. House Democrats, a press conference introducing a bill. This is kind of a nutty tax bill. So they're very concerned with what's happening in Washington, D.C. They have Trump derangement syndrome. They think, Trump is going to ruin the country. And so you're going to hear this number of this $880 billion cuts from Medicaid. So that's what the Democrat talking point is nationally. We can go into a little bit about debunking that and explaining that number. But this press conference says if the federal government cuts Medicaid is we always got to do this, right? Medicaid, Medicare. I always think of myself. Medicaid is aid to the poor from the federal government administered by states. Medicare is part of Social Security, so it's health care for the elderly, 65 and over, whenever you hit your number, retirement age. Medicare, health care for seniors. Medicaid, health care for the poor. And to make it even more complicated, some seniors can be poor and get on both, or one or the other. So cuts to Medicaid is the fear from D.C. And so the House Democrats are saying in this bill, this press conference, if the federal government cuts Medicaid to Minnesota, we will make up the dollar for dollar by raising taxes on millionaires in Minnesota. So they're making this connection between, you're going to hear it, Medicaid cuts and tax cuts for the rich. They're not connected, but they connect them. And then so they're going to say, look aren't we cute? If the federal government cuts Medicaid to Minnesota, we're going to make it up by raising taxes on millionaires, because millionaires aren't taxed enough in Minnesota.
All of Minnesota's millionaires, as you know, a very rich state.
So anyway, we'll stop this a few times. This is Senator Lindsey Port from Burnsville, was one of the many speakers that spoke in this press conference, but she's the best, I think, to showcase the House Democrats today.
So as we heard, the Republican-led Congress is considering plans to cut Medicaid to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest.
Okay.
We're 8 seconds.
Tax cuts for wealthiest Minnesotans. So this is kind of myth number one. The Trump tax cuts, which were passed in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, helped everyone who paid federal taxes. Everybody got tax cuts. And the middle class and the folks at the bottom got big tax cuts, and the people at the top also got tax cuts. And so this is a classic argument over taxes, but the tax cuts helped everybody, including Lindsey Port and her family. Everybody in her district who pays federal taxes got a tax cut. I got a tax cut. Everybody got one. And yes, people who pay a lot into taxes in the federal government, when you cut the rate, they get a big lot back because they pay more in. Right. So it's simple math, but it's good math for Democrats to say that the wealthiest benefited the most. Well, sure, if they pay the most and you cut the rate, they're going to benefit the most on a dollar for dollar basis. But everybody benefited from the tax cuts, and the proposal is to extend those because they automatically die if we don't extend them. So it's the same tax cuts from 2017 are going to be extended. So it's just this rhetoric of tax cuts for the rich. They think it still works. I don't think it works anymore. Our polling says it doesn't work anymore, but they are stuck on it and they continue to do it. So that's the first thing. Tax cuts for the rich. Keep going.
Americans, with the House budget resolution targeting $880 billion in potential reductions to federal Medicaid spending.
All right, stop the tape.
Oh my
so
gosh.
we're
not going to get through
we want to go fast.
I'm not complaining,
All right,
but
second
that
point.
was so funny.
$880 billion in federal cuts to Medicaid. All right, it's not actually that. Of course, if you dig into the numbers, first of all, it's $880 billion over 10 years. Okay, so they never say that, but that's the proposal over 10 years. It's a cut to the entire budget for the Energy and Department of Commerce and Energy in the federal level. They fund everything. There's a lot of things to it. Now, Medicaid is funded through that budget. So if they wanted to cut if they wanted to do all $880 billion over 10 years to Medicaid, they could. Now, it's absurd to think that they will, because It's a cut to the entire budget of the Department of Commerce.
Feels like a big detail. I don't know.
And energy.
Well, this is a lie then. No, I mean, what they're saying is
it's a lie. It's a presupposition. It hasn't happened. So they're saying that, well, because they could cut all $880 billion from Medicaid, that they're just saying they're going to. They're just running with it as this. So yeah, it's a lie to say.
And it's all going to hit that one spot of the budget too. Yeah. Okay, I always remember this is intentional. This is intentionally misleading. Someone told her to say this, or maybe she's doing it on her own. I don't care. That's intentionally misleading.
Yeah. I mean, the 10 years alone is what stretches us out over 10 years.
Yes.
And so that's. It's just, you're going to hear this number a lot. You are hearing it a lot, the $880 billion. Yes, it could impact Medicaid. And by the way,
but they're not going straight to that section.
We're trillions and trillions of dollars in debt in this country. And if something doesn't change, it's going to crash. So to say that nothing can be cut ever is kind of the Democrat motto. You'll see this throughout. But yes, Medicaid could be cut in this, but not $880 billion, and it's over 10 years. All right, keep rolling. We'll go to the next one.
This Republican-led proposal is to take away health care from low-wage and middle-class Americans and give that money to the richest people in this country.
She makes that connection.
I don't know what planet we are living on where anyone or...
Keep it together. Hold it together. Start over.
Start over.
She's elected official.
Yes,
I don't
Senator.
know what planet we are living on that anyone would be so cruel to think that that was okay. I just don't. I don't understand how we continue to applaud the hoarding of wealth, the hoarding of more wealth than any one person could possibly spend in a lifetime, while at the same time we look away as people starve, as people die on the streets, as people die from preventable diseases because they can't afford their health care.
All right, hold. Stop the tape. Stop the tape. All right, here we go. So this is another tried and true tactic from Democrats. People dying in the streets. I mean, it's just great rhetoric, where if we cut welfare programs, healthcare programs from the U.S. government, state government, people are going to die in the streets. It's over the top rhetoric. People in Minnesota are not dying in the streets, but for lack of health care. We have passed Obamacare to provide a guaranteed health care for everybody in the country. So where are the people dying in the streets? You can walk in any emergency room in the state of Minnesota and get care, uncompensated. We'll take care of you, and they'll figure it out later who's going to pay for it. A lot of times the hospital eats that as part of what they call uncompensated care or charity care. So
and that doesn't come without a cost for other people as well. Talk to people in my family who have spent lots of time in the emergency room unable to get care because they're so overwhelmed with how many people are going and trying to get those services.
So this is just a tax cuts for the rich, people dying in the streets. It's like a caricature of Democrat legislators around the country, federally, and here in Minnesota, of course. And then one more piece that she adds that's also part of this great talking point for Democrats. I think you can roll it here.
One of the richest countries on the planet. Healthcare is a very basic human right.
All right, stop the tape. So there's the last one. Healthcare is a very basic human right. It actually can't be a very basic human right, and we explain this a lot. But if healthcare is a right, how do you receive that right? If I have a right to healthcare, how does that work? Like say so. If I have a right to healthcare, who's going to give me that healthcare? It requires other people to do things. Do you pay for things? It requires a doctor or a nurse at some point. So if I have a right to healthcare, I walk into a hospital and say, "Give me healthcare." I have a right to that. Where does that come from? Well, then a doctor has to provide it. Forcing the doctor to provide that right to me. That's not a right anymore because now I'm using other people. I'm infringing on theirs. It's like forced labor or even slavery to say that the doctor has to help me because I have a right to health care. So it's just, it's a philosophical argument. I know what they mean. They want a society where everybody has health care. Great. So do I. But to call it a right,
that's strong language.
It's just rhetorically not possible.
Yeah.
Rights have to be inalienable, have to come from yourself. A right to free speech allows me to speak. That's something I do, and you can try to stop me from doing that. But then the right tells me I'm allowed to do that. This is a right that involves others. And so it's worked, though. They have convinced many people in this country that all kinds of things are rights that can't be rights by definition. But that's just, our 2 cents from the think tank today. Healthcare is not a right.
It can't be.
And these are just great talking points. By the way, when she was done speaking, we didn't keep going. they brought a woman up in a wheelchair, as the prop for this press conference. So we joke about it. It's like bring in the wheelchairs to the committee hearing and talk about the sad stories and the tough stories. They have a woman next in speaking at this press conference yesterday in a wheelchair talking about, I'm sure she's on Medicaid or some form of assistance. I would also, I believe that most Minnesotans, all Minnesotans, would agree that folks in that condition need help from the rest of us.
Yeah.
There is a system in place to do that, a safety net. There are certain people in society that we need to help, and we're going to use government to help them. But of course, we're going to use that and exploit that, like you were saying earlier, Kathryn. We exploit the minority to get the majority thing, and then in the process, we don't really help either.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that emotional manipulation they do all the time. And plus, you told me something, Bill, before we started recording, the percentage of people, I think you said kids in Minnesota that are on Medicare.
Medicaid, yep.
Medicaid. I thought I had it right. Sorry.
There's no kids on Medicare because you got to be 65.
Okay.
But yes, it came up in this press conference earlier, and they said 43% of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid, according to this press conference, and I think that's a good number. We have 1.4 million people, I think, in the state of Minnesota on Medicaid. It's almost a sixth of the population, or a fifth of the population. So 1 in 5 of us are on Medicaid. And the governor and these Democrat legislators think that's a good thing. They would judge our society based on how many people we're helping on Medicaid. I think it's a failure
Right.
that many people need government assistance for their health care.
Yeah.
And that 43% of children are on it, and lots of kids are being born through the Medicaid funded system. And so I think it's a failure. I think it's something we should turn around. We should be helping people like that woman in the other clip who got some help early and then took care of herself from there on. That should be the philosophy, but we are just stuck, and we are determining value based on the wrong things, on inputs. It's all inputs. How much money can we put in the system? How many people can we serve? Those are inputs, not successful.
Yes,
success
exactly.
stories.
They're always looking at the inputs and not the outputs. Like, it's not a success to just say there are this percentage of our people in Minnesota on government health care. That in and of itself is not a success. You can't taunt that as like something great, in my opinion. But are people getting healthcare? Are people healthy? What's the outcome of that? They never talk about that. And I think maximizing the amount of people that are doing well and are healthy in our state is by far the most important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, another metric, an output, is people who use food shelves in Minnesota. And it's historically high. It's doubled year over year. We've been doubling the growth in food shelf use. So why, if we are so generous on the government side and we have 1.4 million people and all these kids on Medicaid for healthcare, and all these other programs helping them, why are people walking into food shelves at such a high rate? That's an output. That's an indicator that things are not well and not going well. And that's something we had to work on. So.
Yeah, Governor Tim Walz's goal should be to see those numbers shrinking every year. That would be a sign of a healthy, functioning state that has a populace that is well cared for and is thriving. And he doesn't have that, and he's bragging about the fact that he doesn't have it. Oh, that was kind of a downer. I can see why you were angry.
I'm angry.
That was
angry, Dave.
that was a little upsetting. Any final thoughts before we kick things over to us and Bill Glahn?
No, you go.
Well, we gotta end on a happier note, right?
Anything nice? Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about the story of our Minnesota's, senators, our jailed senators.
Oh my gosh, that's
that's
not
not
a happy.
That's not a
note.
happy ending either. I don't really want to talk about that now.
I know. That one's
a
a tough
downer.
one too, because I'm usually like hot on the drama that's in the Minnesota legislature. Like, I'm ready. I want to talk about, people are, getting in trouble, whatever. Oh, but this one will put a knot in your stomach. This is not the good kind of drama where it's like, something funny or something interesting.
No,
this
and
is
the
a
more we learn,
sickening.
the worse it gets, too.
Oh, like gut-wrenching. So if you don't know, one of our state senators here, what does he represent? Is it Grand Rapids?
Grand
Minnesota?
Rapids and Brainerd.
He was arrested by the feds, right, for child prostitution, essentially. He had responded to an ad from a fake 17-year-old girl. It was actually a federal agent, I think, or a Bloomington police officer. I can't remember. And had gone to meet up with that person, intending to pay her for sex. It appears that he went straight from session to this meetup, and things have come out since then, like, he's remotely trying to get people to wipe his electronics. He had, like a gun he didn't tell them about, refused to tell them about, different things like that, and clearly this had not been the first time, I think, that this happened based on some of the language he was using. He has multiple
Never is.
phones.
Yeah, so the good
This is
news
not a
is-
fun topic.
The good
You're
news is he's no longer a member of the Senate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it does point out the political difference in how this is handled, because this is a Republican senator who do these things, and within days, I mean, immediately they were calling for him to resign, and he had to resign from jail because he was going to be thrown out of the Senate, because the Republican leader Mark Johnson just had no tolerance for it and said can't be in the Senate and have this charge against you, and so. Right before they were going to throw him out, he did get his letter into the governor and resign, and so he's out. He's out of the Senate. There's a race forming to replace him. I think we should get the writ of special election today from the governor, because the governor has been schooled by the U.S. State Supreme Court on how to do writs now.
Wow.
Good point.
Because the last one he didn't do right, so this one maybe he'll get
So
right.
many writs.
So we get the writ and they get that special election, get him replaced. Meanwhile, the burglar senator, under felony indictment, pushed her trial off until end of session this summer, a full year after the incident, remains voting, continues to vote for the good
God.
citizens of Woodbury and Maplewood because the Democrat leadership has not seen fit to throw her out. So it kind of gave us a little window into leadership in the Senate. Republican screws up, they bounce him immediately. Democrat screws up, they continue to vote, represent their district, hold on to that one seat majority, hold on to power. It's all about power. So
I did want to ask
protecting
you,
your own, yeah.
Bill, or local historian, has it traditionally been the case that if you are charged with a felony and you are in the legislature, you resign? Is that kind of tradition?
most of them resign. Yeah.
There's also issues with people getting things like maybe you'd see as a lower level charge, like a DUI or whatever. And those people, I think that happened to 2 Democrats in the past.
And a Republican senator a few years ago. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and those people didn't resign. So I'm wondering,
No.
traditionally, has the line been it's you're charged with a felony?
Well, yeah. I mean, it doesn't happen that often. I mean,
Yeah.
But yeah, they say, well, not very many people have been thrown out of the legislature. Well, most of them resign.
Yeah.
When it gets to that
Sure,
point,
sure.
most of them resign and don't force their colleagues to go through the process of kicking them out of the Senate or the House. So this is the normal course. When I heard this of Senator Eichorn, I know Senator Eichorn. I helped him get elected. I recruited him to run for the Senate years ago. I thought for sure, he'll resign. He'll resign. And it just took a couple days of find a piece of paper, I'm sure, in the jail cell to write a letter to the governor, because you have to formally write a letter to the governor to resign, and he did. And so, most of them resign because they see the future. They also, they screw up, but they also say, I don't want to put the Senate through any more turmoil. I want to get somebody in the seat that can represent the people I represent, because how is he possibly going to represent people in Brainerd and Grand Rapids from jail?
Yeah.
But on the other side, the Woodbury senator continues to vote.
Well, and the argument I've heard is, because I would think maybe should you give everyone that due process? Wait until their trial is over. But the argument I heard, actually, I think Max Reimer was saying this on John Justice, you have to be held to a higher standard to some degree when you are in elected office. And if you're charged with a felony, like either of these 2 were, I think the assumption is you're not going to be totally focused on representing the people from your district. You should resign, and you should focus on that and let someone who can spend all of their time doing the job that you were elected to do fill in that seat. Because that's what your constituents deserve.
80,000 people in that Senate district. Someone else can come down and vote on their behalf in the Senate. Exactly. Good point.
Yeah. All right, kind of a downer again, but I think we'll kick things over to us.
I heard Scott Jennings is coming as our annual dinner on May 17th.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be hysterical. I can't wait for that event. He's going to
that'll
be
be
so
fun.
funny and a great entertaining night.
Yeah,
Scott
everyone-
Jennings, May 17th. Go to
AmericanExperiment.org/events.
Yes.
And sign up. And you're not going to want to miss that night. It's going to be a fun
absolutely.
night. There.
Nice little
There.
plug. That was
I
great.
got us back up.
I
Got us back up.
love it. Yeah, come have fun with us on May 17th. See you there. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next week. American Experiment is supported by thousands of individuals like you. To join the movement, go to www.americanexperiment.org and click the yellow donate button. From all of us here, thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the American Experiment podcast. As always, I'm sitting here with Kathryn, and today we are joined in studio by Bill Glahn.
Yay, welcome, Bill.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our fraud expert, and thank goodness, because there have been some really dramatic developments in Minnesota's world of fraud.
It's been a big month in fraud.
Big month in fraud.
What a great claim to fame for Minnesota.
That could be the title. Remember that, Isaac. A big month for fraud.
Tell us. So we got a verdict in the big Feeding Our
Right,
Future
right.
trial. Tell us all about it.
So the second Feeding Our Future trial ended last week, and it ended in guilty pleas all around. So there were 2 defendants on trial, Amy Bach, who is the founder and CEO of the Feeding Our Future nonprofit that was the center of the Feeding Our Future scandal. And then her co-defendant is named Salim Saeed. He was a co-owner of the Safari restaurant. And Safari served as the largest single food vendor for the Feeding Our Future network. And both were on trial in federal court in downtown Minneapolis, and both were found guilty on all counts. So unlike the first trial that was held about a year ago, where there were 7 defendants on trial and 5 of them were convicted, 2 were actually acquitted, and I don't believe a single one of them was convicted on all counts. Some of them were convicted on some counts, 2 of them convicted on none of the counts, but this one, the 2 defendants convicted on all counts.
And just to be clear, because I'm very into the bribery angle, a lot of people might remember that story where someone attempted to bribe one of the jurors. That was the last. That was not this one, right? That we're talking about now. That was a previous trial, and then there's charges forthcoming, or have been charges made at trial forthcoming for that separately, right?
So the bribery case, the attempted juror bribery, happened with the first trial, and oddly enough, one of the 2 people who were acquitted in that case were indicted in the bribery case.
No way.
So that person had gotten off on the fraud charges, but then was immediately taken into custody and is still in custody awaiting the trial in the bribery case.
Doesn't it seem to signal that maybe
so there was only
acquitted?
there was only one guy who was acquitted in the first fraud trial, not involved in the bribery. So he got out. He's out.
Our one angel.
One guy got off but the other one is in custody awaiting trial in the bribery. There were 5 people who were indicted in the bribery case.
5? That's
5.
A lot.
Well, there were 3 from the fraud trial and then 2 others who were conspirators in the bribery. And 2 of them have pled guilty, and a third one's going to plead guilty in early April. So there are 2 more. They're both brothers. They're both going to stand trial at some point in the bribery case. But I understand your confusion because this most recent trial involved a witness tampering charge. And the witness tampering person was another defendant who happened not to be on trial in this case or in this go-round. Supposed to be on a trial in a later episode, but that person's already gone ahead and pled guilty. So
wait, so what was the tampering in question?
There was a witness. In fact, yet another defendant was going to testify on behalf of the prosecution in this current trial.
Okay.
And there was a defendant who was not on trial this go-round. It's going to be on trial later. He was just hanging out as a spectator, actually making a spectacle of himself in the back of the courtroom. But during a break in the trial, they were out in the hallway, and the defendant tapped the other guy on the shoulder, the witness, and said, "Hey, could you come meet me in the bathroom? I want to talk about the case."
No.
And then he said no, and then he reported it to his lawyer, and then his lawyer reported it to the prosecutor. The prosecutor reported it to the judge, and anyway, the guy ended up pleading guilty in the case, including the witness tampering part of it.
It's just, thank God he said something. It makes you think about how many cases go unnoticed. How many times are witnesses tampered with that we don't know about? Same with the bribery case. I mean, you hope it almost never happens, but we only know about this because the guy who was being targeted said something.
Well, it was a gal. Yeah. She was
it was a woman.
It was a woman who was supposed to have been the bribery object, and the bag woman in the case, who was pled guilty, she dropped off a Hallmark gift bag of $120,000 in currency, hundreds and fifties, and dropped it off at the house of the juror. The juror happened to not be home at the time, but when she did come home, and
she left it on the door, $150,000.
Well, knocked on the door. There was somebody home.
Okay,
but it wasn't the juror, and she left the bag of cash behind. And when the juror came home and found about it, she immediately called the local police, who called the FBI, who came and got the bag of cash. And
I like to think I would do that too, but do you think you would skim $10K off the top, and then report
I swear there was only 100,000
here. Oh, she tried to bribe me with 100,000, and then you tuck a little in the sock drawer.
As it turned out, the bag woman who was pled guilty in the bribery case, she skimmed $80,000 off the top.
80.
So she was supposed to have given the bag of cash with $200,000. But while she was in the car, she scooped out $80,000 and put it in her pocket, and then dropped the the bag off with only 120,000.
Did she not think anyone was going to notice? Like in that scenario, I would have
Well, I
taken
don't
like
think
10.
anybody did
Maybe
until
20.
it
Yeah,
came
I
up
would
to
have
the
gone
court.
for 80.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's like fair though. If you're gonna be the one to bribe someone, you got to do some skimming off.
Go
the top,
big or go
probably.
home, I guess.
If you're gonna say yes to that. Wow. Okay. So
wow.
back to
Tangent.
sorry, I kind of derailed us because that's my favorite part. Is there's like no
The bad
shortage
woman.
of drama in this saga.
It's made for TV. It's
but
made for
you
a
were
movie.
there in the courtroom and saw Amy Buck and Salim Syed.
Salim Syed.
They were handcuffed and taken off to prison.
Well,
Is that right?
to jail. The federal lockup. The feds only have a couple of facilities around the state where they can lock up prisoners. They don't have their own. So they lease space from the Sherburne County Jail. So they were taken
okay.
up to the Sherburne County Jail, Anoka, and I can't remember, one or two other places where federal prisoners can be housed on a temporary basis.
Okay.
But the U.S. Marshals, with the body armor, the jackets, with the just like Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, they come and handcuff them, take
Are
them
you
out of the
familiar?
I got
No,
nothing.
okay,
Nothing?
no, that's
No,
okay. That's okay.
So this is temporary. So where do they go from here?
Well, they're
not
they're
been-
awaiting sentencing.
Okay.
At some point, there'll be sentencing in the case, and
Okay.
then there'll be the presumption is when you're convicted in federal court, even if you're convicted of a so-called white-collar crime, you're still supposed to be held until your sentencing.
Okay.
So, and who knows when that'll be? We've had 45 convictions in the case between people convicted at trial and people convicted through guilty pleas. But so far, only 3 have been sentenced. So we're still waiting for some 42 other sentencing hearings to be scheduled. So they got quite a backlog. So they might be up in Sherburne County for a while.
Is there like an amount? What's the maximum amount they could get? Do you know that? Or what are we expecting the sentencing to look like? Like, I just have no idea for this sort of white collar crime. Do you go to prison for life? Is it 1 year? You could tell me
Yeah.
anything
Right.
and I wouldn't know.
Well, I'm just
That's so
guessing,
true.
but I'm guessing it'll be over 20 years each.
Whoa.
Because
wow.
one of the persons who has been sentenced was convicted in the first trial, and he was sentenced to 17 and a half years. And that's the biggest one yet. And both of these individuals were much more involved in the larger fraud scheme than the guy who got 17 and a half years.
Sure.
So I'm guessing when they get sentenced, it'll be more than the 17 and a half years.
So she was truly the mastermind of this entire scheme. This all came from her? Or
Well,
was she just sort of, I don't know, figurehead's the wrong word, but the
gatekeeper.
poster child of this?
The gatekeeper, I think, is the phrase that the prosecutors fixed on.
Interesting.
Because she ran this nonprofit, Feeding Our Future, and all of the people who have pled guilty or been convicted were vendors to her nonprofit.
Okay.
And they only got involved in the ability to steal money from the government through participating in her network. So she was literally the only person who could enter applications into the computer system for them to join. She was literally the only person who signed the paper checks paying them whatever claims they had made against the meal program. So she was a single person of contact between what they call these sites, these vendors, and the Department of Education,
Okay.
either coming or going, either putting in the claims, putting in the applications, or distributing the money. She was the sole signer of checks.
And what was in it for her? I mean, with every new distributor that she signed up, was that of benefit to her? She was getting some portion of that money?
Yes, so there was a spreadsheet they showed during the trial where the feds calculated that she personally benefited to the tune of $1.9 million. And you gasp, but that's actually one of the smallest numbers involved.
I was
in
going to
this
say, but
case.
isn't it
My
overall $650 million,
Well,
right?
$250 million just for her network.
Oh, okay,
just for
okay.
Feeding Our
For her
Future,
network.
$250 million. And
You're right. Where did it all go?
So, well, everywhere. Las Vegas, her boyfriend rented a Lamborghini on a trip to Las Vegas.
Oh my gosh.
Some of it went to buy commercial property, residential properties. Some of it was put into cryptocurrency. They're never going to see that. Some of it was put into real estate abroad,
no.
Kenya, Istanbul, a couple other places where these fraudsters bought real estate in other countries. We're never going to see that money again.
I suppose.
Some of it was just spent, on shopping sprees at Nordstrom's or Home Depot, other luxury places like that.
Mine would be Nordstrom.
High roller. Oh
I would for sure. I think I would go Nordstrom. Then like some sort of home goods. I would go get furniture. Crate and Barrel. I would go to like Crate and Barrel. That would
be so
one guy,
dangerous.
One of the guys, the guy convicted, he spent $13,000 at Best Buy for new TVs for his new home that he spent $1 million for.
$13,000.
I feel like TVs are cheap.
There's a big house, like 6,000 square
Yeah.
feet. You got to have a TV in every room.
Wow.
That's incredible. That's awful. I would never commit fraud. But that sounds like a really good time.
Awful, but the shopping spree.
Yeah, I should have brought you the list of all of the places they shopped at, because I never heard of half these stores. And,
That would be fascinating. I love that. Okay, so speaking of,
I've
you
heard
say they
Nordstrom's,
spend.
I've heard of Best Buy, but a lot of the others.
Yeah, we'll look at that and see. Good. Do they have good taste?
Yeah,
Like we can evaluate.
We can
Grace,
rank
from our
actually
perspective.
each.
So speaking
Burberry,
of,
I've heard of Burberry.
Wow.
maybe they got the
okay.
matching like rain jackets.
Yeah.
I want one of those Burberry rain jackets and then a matching one for my dog.
I was literally just gonna say dog rain jackets.
Yeah.
I bet some were purchased in this.
That
in
I would
this-
approve.
Yeah, this
So everybody
spree.
knows, I got this sweater at JCPenney. I spent $14 for it.
Wow. It doesn't look like you spent $14, so
a
that's
good-looking sweater.
successful. But speaking of money spent in other countries, you asked a question, I think, of when you were in the press conference. Was it following the sentencing? No, it's not sentencing.
The trial, yeah.
Following the trial.
They read the verdict. The U.S. Marshals took away the defendants, and then immediately, now that was on the 13th floor of the federal building, and then they went down to the 6th floor where the U.S. Attorney has her offices, and the acting U.S. Attorney, her name is Kirkpatrick, and then the lead prosecutor, whose name is Joe Thompson. They had a press conference, and in fact, I had a photo I put up on the website of there's like more than a dozen, 20 or so, all the people from the FBI,
Wow.
the IRS, the Postal Service.
It's a big crowd.
It was a big crowd because, it's 3
Postal
years
Service.
and 70 defendants. So it's been a bigger operation. And they had a press conference, and I asked a question because 70 defendants, 45 either guilty pleas or convictions, the 2 acquittals, but there are 4 of the defendants who are international fugitives from justice that they got while the getting was good. A couple of them were fled before the indictments were handed down, and a couple of them managed to slip the noose before or after the indictments were announced, but before they had their first hearing. So they left the country. There was a 5th. There was a gal who was a 5th fugitive. She actually came back. She came back home
for
and
her.
pled guilty.
I was about
of
to
the
say
case.
questionable.
But there are 4 others who are abroad. I don't know if they're all in Somalia, but they're overseas, and good luck getting them back.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah.
There's no chance unless they come back voluntarily that they're ever going to stand trial here, right? I mean,
It's got to be some weird where they go and visit a country that has an extradition treaty,
oh my
or
gosh,
they're picked up by Interpol or something like that, or we make a deal with the government there to hand them over for some consideration.
So you said there were 70 people that were indicted total.
So far.
So far.
That was another question that came up at the press conference. Will there be more indictments?
Right.
And Joe Thompson, the prosecutor, says he expects there will be more indictments. He wasn't making any guarantees
Sure.
or announcing any timetable, but he says the investigation is still ongoing and he expects there'll be more indictments. But so far, 70 indicted in the fraud case, and then another 3 who weren't in the fraud case who were indicted in the bribery case.
Right. So of those 7, so this is only the second trial that we've had so far, right? Has everyone in that list of 70 people, minus the people who have fled, already stood trial? Or what percent of the way through this are we?
We're pretty far along. I calculate 18 are left. Once you account
that's
for
it. Wow.
once you account for the convictions, the 2 acquittals, the 4 fugitives from justice, and sadly to say, there was one defendant who actually died of natural causes since this stuff has started 3 years ago. So we've had the actuarial tables have caught up with the group, and we're down to 18 who haven't been processed in some way.
Okay.
But we just had, since the trial ended, we just had another guilty plea. And so I suspect there'll be more guilty pleas after this last courtroom trial where the 2 defendants, despite their best efforts, were convicted on all counts. I wouldn't be surprised to see more guilty pleas. And in fact, there was a trial scheduled to begin next month, and there were originally 5 defendants in that group going to trial in April. And now after this last guilty plea, we're down to just 1 of the 5. And that one just so happens to be 8 months pregnant. She's scheduled to give birth between now and the start of the trial. So
boy.
I'm guessing that's not going to happen next month. Or the birth will happen, but not the trial.
The trial.
We
right.
will hope.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move on to other non-feeding our future cases of fraud. Before we do, though, I remember hearing or reading that there were moments during the trial, and you were in the courtroom for a lot of it, so I can ask you this. I remember hearing that there were moments when jurors actually laughed out loud at some of the claims that the prosecution and the defendants were making. Is that true?
I think I was only in the room for one. It was some
Okay.
statement that, from memory, that Amy Bach made. It was just so ridiculous that she wasn't trying to make a joke, but that's the way it was taken by the jurors.
Well, and if you read like some of the things that you reported on and other people who were in the room, it seemed to be that the owner of that Safari restaurant kind of admitted to other crimes.
Yeah, he seemed to at one point straight up confess to tax evasion.
Oh, dear.
So and then again, he wasn't as disciplined as Amy Bach was, and Amy Bach stuck to her catchphrases and her talking points, and he more wanted to tell his own story, and some of it didn't help him, but I don't think it would have made a difference in the end. The trial went for 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. And if you think about it, they have to elect a foreman, they have to have some discussion of it. I'm guessing at some point lunch was brought in, so I'm not sure
Right.
how long they actually deliberated, but they were out the door 5 hours after they started, and it was not a close call.
Yeah.
Bill, if they were to someday make a movie on this, would you be willing to consult as a Feeding Our Future expert on set?
Who would play you?
And who would play Amy Bach? That's my question.
Yeah.
Well, it was Scott Johnson of Powerline. He was in the trial at the back of the courtroom, I think every day of the trial. He suggested Frances McDormand. I think she's a little old now
boy.
to play that role.
got nothing.
But somebody like that, I referenced the Marge Gunderson character in a thing I wrote after the trial. She has that famous scene at the very end of the movie Fargo where she's got the suspect in the backseat of her squad car. She's the chief of police of Brainerd, Minnesota, and she goes, all of that for just a little bit of money. And it's such a beautiful day. But yes, she would be great in the part because Amy Bach has maybe not as strong as Marge Gunderson in Fargo, but has a distinct Minnesota accent. And so I think that would be useful. So a young Frances McDormand.
Nice. I'm glad we figured this out.
Yeah.
Hollywood, contact us anytime you want.
Yeah. Seriously. Give Bill Glahn a credit.
Yeah. Writer credit.
Yeah.
Let's move on to non-feeding our future fraud, scandal, waste, and abuse in Minnesota. I want first to ask you, Bill, what is the fraud tracker total at? And then second of all, I want to talk about the State Department of Education. I heard there might be some nonsense going on there.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. So I haven't updated in the last couple of weeks. I haven't found a new case to add. So the official scandal tracker 2025 number is still holding at $611 million.
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll take what we can.
But
We'll call that a win.
You brought up the State Department of Education. It's pretty timely because they have testified 2 or 3 times in front of committees at the state legislature this year. And what they've said consistently when asked about the Feeding Our Future, and keep in mind, they're the agency who sent the money out the door.
Yeah.
They're the agency who sent $250 million of taxpayer money to Amy Bach for her to distribute amongst all these fraudsters.
Gosh.
And during these hearings that we've had at the Capitol where they've testified, they said, well, we can't get into that because the trial is going on.
Oh my goodness. I'm so tired of hearing
The trial started February 3rd. And you remember we had a bit of a late start to the legislative session this year. We won't get into that.
Why was that?
But the trial started February 3rd, just ended last week. And the State Department of Education said, well, we can't answer any questions about the Feeding Our Future fraud because the trial is going on. Well, the trial's ended. Trial's over. You have no more excuse. So let's hear about it because we heard they testified, they had some of their officials testify for the prosecution. And then much of Amy Bach's defense, such as it was blaming the Department of Education. Now, they didn't get her off the hook. But one point she did have was the staggering incompetence of the State Department of Education in this and how they were able to let $250 million go out the door. And again, I criticize Governor Tim Walz a lot. But one statement he has made about the Feeding Our Future case in public, he has said that the Department of Education, caught the fraud early. And that is true. The Office of Legislative Auditor did a whole report. Took them 2 years to do it, but they traced the entire history of MDE's, Department of Education's regulation or lack thereof, of the Feeding Our Future nonprofit, and documented how they had figured out who the fraudsters were before a single dollar went out the door.
No way.
That these entities, including some that were on trial here this last week, applied to join the program in April of 2020 and were denied. Those applications were denied initially by the Department of Education. They could have started this thing or stopped this thing before it even started, but they caved. They allowed these applications to be approved, sent some money out the door. They had another chance when only 50 million had gone out the door. They made another effort to stop the whole thing in its tracks and caved in again. And then after that point, another 200 million went out the door.
Why did they keep caving?
Yeah, why were they unable to?
Well, these are the questions we want to ask them. And they say
they
we
won't
can't answer because the trial's still going on.
Oh my gosh.
But this is the great unanswered mystery. Is good for them. They figured out who these fraudsters were or were going to be, but they never had the courage to stop them, even though they made many failed attempts to do so.
I don't know. That's almost worse in my mind that they knew and they could have. And not
They
just
could
that,
have.
they were too incompetent to
in
even know what was
fact-
going on.
In fact, about a year into it, about a year after the scandal started, the Department of Education cut off all the money. They stopped paying invoices. They froze them out. And then within a couple, 3 weeks, they started sending the checks out the door again.
Oh my gosh.
They had all these chances to stop it and didn't until the FBI raids. So in January of 2020, the FBI conducted what had been described as the biggest federal raids in Minnesota history, where it was 200 federal agents, not just FBI, but I mentioned Postal Service inspectors, IRS agents, I think maybe ATF, whoever they could press into service who had a federal badge. 200 of them, they got together and executed search warrants all over the Twin Cities on these Feeding Our Future sites and locations, private homes, offices. And at that point, finally, the Department of Education cut off the money. But that's what it took.
Guys.
That's what it took. 200 federal agents conducting simultaneous search warrants where the Department of Education finally felt emboldened enough to finally shut off the money supply.
And, people have, Walz, for example, has said, he's seen all this pushback coming from all of the fraud that's happened under his watch. And he's kind of proposed some solutions. What do you think about what, the Department of Education, Governor Walz, what do they need to do moving forward to make sure this doesn't happen again? And are any of Walz's solutions that he's had so far viable or helpful?
Some of them might be helpful at the margins, but he seems to be missing the larger point. And I know Republican legislators had a press conference about this week, and he had held a hearing on his proposals. And the way I would characterize them is rearranging the deck chairs. So he's moving people from one box on the org chart to another box on the org chart, maybe adding a few agents, people for investigation of fraud at the state level. I understand he only has provisions for hiring a single forensic accountant to the effort. And it was the forensic accountant who works for the FBI was the one who broke this case open, and her work on getting the bank records and putting the pieces together. And so he just basically wants to move a group that's housed in the Department of Commerce to another state agency, hire a few people, but not getting at the real crux of the problem, which is this lack of an enterprise-wide view of fraud in state government. Everybody at each agency, even within an agency, each government program, that's all they see. And what we found with the Feeding Our Future defendants is almost half of them had not just the food program, but they were taking money out of the daycare program, the autism program. They were, some of them, up to 6 different state programs they were taking money out of, but they've only ever been indicted in the food scam.
Oh, no.
So that's what these agencies don't talk to each other. So somebody is stealing money from the food program through the Department of Education. Nobody at the Department of Human Services is doing anything about the money they're taking out of the child care program. So some of the solutions that have been proposed at the state level is a statewide inspector general, or one of the ideas that we promoted here at the center is the the state auditor, which is already an elected position, giving the state auditor more powers to investigate fraud at the state level. And so there's some of these proposals floating around. I suppose some of the ideas that Governor Walz has proposed would help at the margins, hiring a few more people. The Attorney General, Keith Ellison, has an office within his agency, which is a Medicaid fraud unit.
Okay.
And that could use a few more people. You mentioned the fraud tracker, the scandal tracker. By number, most of the items on that tracker were items caught by this Medicaid fraud unit in the state attorney general's office. So they're doing good work. They could use more help.
Sure.
Yeah, the state auditor. What does that person do?
Nothing really. It's really odd.
I've never been able to quite figure that out. You said maybe they should be able to investigate fraud, but what else are they? What are they doing currently?
The name of the office is state auditor, but statutorily, most of the assignments given to the state auditor are auditing local governments. So it's a statewide office, but they spend most of their time auditing counties and cities.
Okay.
And the larger counties and cities have opted out of this. They hire their own staff or their own accountants.
Wow. Okay.
So
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah,
So you can opt out of it.
they can opt out of it. And again,
Feels like a red flag.
but back to your question, what does the state auditor do? It seems like precious little. But
Yeah.
we already have this elected position. They already have an office. Let's give them a real assignment, something really, and a staff to go after it.
Well, I'm on board.
Yeah.
Let's make sure another $610 million doesn't fly out of the taxpayers'
Pretty
coffers.
preferable,
That sounds good. Bill Glahn, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Well, again, the Feeding Our Future, we got 18 more suspects to process.
Yeah.
And I suspect there'll be more before this is all said and done. But really, this legislative session has really one chance before they adjourn in May to get it right, to do something that's really going to put in place a mechanism or an entity or something that's going to look at fraud across state government and put a stop to it.
And if anyone's interested in bribing us over here,
So we can go to
me.
Nordstrom's.
Yeah, so that I can go to Nordstrom in Burberry and get my dog the matching rain jacket. Come to me. No one else is fine. Bill probably too ethical. He won't take it. Come to me.
Just leave it on the doorstep.
Yeah.
Bill, I'm open. Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Love to have you back again. Everyone, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, do all the things to help us reach more people, and we will see you next week.